We are the ministry of the real truth. And today we are looking at a complete excerpt from the Grand Bible, the 4th Revised Edition, published in 2022. The Torah, the teachings, or the books of law, or the Samaritan Bible, or the Pentateuch, or the 5 books of Moses. This document is part of a series being an excerpt from the Grand Bible, 4th Revised Edition, published by Lord Henfield in 2022. Pictorial documentation plus page numbers in the Grand Bible. A complete excerpt from the Grand Bible. Somewhere all around 1995 BC, the Mount Vesuvius in Italy erupted and caused a massive climate change for decades. The extreme weather conditions that followed led to drought, famine and civil war. It brought civilizations like the Minoan or the Indus Valley civilizations to their end. Egypt, Canaan and Mesopotamia were at the brink of collapse. The Hyksos have arrived in Egypt during Egypt's 12th dynasty, 1991 to 1802 BC. Today, they are identified with Canaanites. They have settled peacefully in Goshen, or Gosen, the Avaris area. Lower Egypt, which is actually Upper Egypt, at first, they seem to have been welcomed by Egypt and the Egyptians because the site was originally founded by Amenemhat I, or at least with his consent, on an eastern branch of the Nile in the Delta. See, these Egyptians like Dr. Henry Clark or Dr. Ben Yochanan, whatever his name is, Pan-Africans, said that the Egyptians were very kind, very nice, and there was a famine in Goshen and Europe at the time, so these people came down, they were starving, etc. And they knew that Egypt had plenty, which they did because when the Nile flooded over and then went back down, they used that black fertile soil that it left behind, that deposit, to grow their crops. So everyone that was a magician, musician, etc., artist, dropped their paintbrushes, etc., and went and planted the seed. And then at the time of the harvest or reaping, they all dropped their tools again, their paintbrushes, etc., and helped gather the harvest and put it in barns or a certain pyramid for storage. And that's why they were never without. So they allowed these Hyksos to come in, and probably others, like the Bible says Jacob and his family, because there was a family in Goshen, and they lived on, but they started to overpopulate, and supposedly they were riding their chariots up and down in early hours of the night, in the morning, to the morning, and making a hell of a racket. So the Egyptian king Ahmose said, that's it, had enough of these guys, get them out, Egypt for Egypt, and so forth. Soon, however, they had established their own kingdoms. So the 14th dynasty around 1725 to 1850 BC, and 15th dynasty 1650 to 1550. And 1550 BC in Upper Egypt or Lower Egypt. When the Hyksos Canaanites tried to conquer Upper Egypt at the end of the 18th dynasty, 1550 to 1290 BC, they provoked the Egyptians to fight for their country, which ended with the total defeat of the Hyksos Canaanites and their expulsion from Egypt. These events match almost perfectly with events described in the Hebrew Bible after the tribes of Abraham have migrated to Egypt at around 1950 BC, and after the defeat of their successors by the kings of Karmos and Amos have been driven out, in an event known to us as the Exodus of Moses and the Israelites, the Hebrews. According to the Hebrew Bible, an unnamed pharaoh, most likely Amos, ordered the Israelites to leave Egypt in Exodus 12:37, 38, 40, 41. We read, and the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses, Ramesses, that would be probably a centre or a city there, to Succoth, or Sukkot, about 600,000 on foot that were men. See him look at them because she's beside children. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years, and it came to pass at the end of the 430 years even the self same day it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went up from the land of Egypt. The text was obviously written long after the Exodus. It was written long after the Exodus. Their starting point was not Ramses, because that city was built by Ramses I. And we believe through Dr. Ben, him showing this European guy, this white guy, that the Assyrians came and sacked it, destroyed it, and then spent some time there ruling, apparently. Okay, their starting point was not Ramesses, because that city was built by Ramses I. And this other guy proved that their timeline was out by 100 years or so, or too far ahead or something like that. The author meant Avaris, the capital city of the Hyksos, meaning the Canaanites, Israelites, and Egypt, which was at the very same location. When the author used the name Ramesses several hundred years later, Avaris was already forgotten or shamefully replaced. The name Sukkoth, or Sukkot, was chosen not incidentally but on purpose. The Hebrew word Sukkot is the plural of Sukkah, meaning hut, both tabernacle or confinement, such as a canal lock. Today, Sukkot is known as a festival's name, the festival of ingathering at the year's end, Exodus 34:22. It marks the end of the harvest time and thus of the agricultural year in the land of Israel. People built a kind of hut or shed, which is a walled structure covered with sechak, or plant materials such as overgrowth or palm trees. The real religious reason is that of commemorating the Exodus. Ye shall dwell in booths 7 days, all that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths, that your generation may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. God, Leviticus 23, 42, 43. What has the festival to do with confinement? The above mentioned name Sukkoth is not without significance. Sukkoth or Sukkot is the place where the canal of the pharaohs, built by Pharaoh Senusret III between 1878 and 1839 BC, had locks, Sukkot, water confinements, canal locks that could confine and define the water in order to keep the salty or bitter water from the bitter lakes separated from the valuable sweet water of the river Nile, which the canal was heading to. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind, and that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided, and the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on the left. Exodus 14, 21, 22. These events took place at about 1530 BC, perhaps 700 or 800 years before they were finally written down. To an attentive reader, this description brings canal locks into his mind, with walls of water and even with plant material swimming on the water surface. And dividing the water is precisely what a water lock does. There is a high likelihood that the Hebrew Bible tries to tell us about a real and historical event in the past without telling us too much. The expulsion of the Canaanite Hyksos, or the children of Israel, as they called themselves, was ordered by that Pharaoh, most likely right after the Hyksos were defeated in the 18th or 15th year of Moses' reign. That was in around 1530 BC. For 430 years did they live in Egypt, which means since 1960 BC. On his expedition to Israel 1842 to 1845, Carl Richard Lepsius found the amazing wall painting above in the tomb of Hotep II, a government official who died in around 1950 BC. In Beni Hassan, an ancient Egyptian cemetery near Memphis, it shows a man described in the text on the wall as Abishar the Hyksos, Hika Kasul for Hyksos, leading a group of Arameans, Canaanites. This is not only one of the earliest known uses of the term Hyksos and the oldest picture that showed Hyksos, but it matches exactly the date of arrival, 430 years before the defeat, 1960 BC. So we're going to look at this wall relief here. Okay, these here are the Hyksos, or the Arameans, the Aamu. They're not black. Yeah, there's some here that are quite dark, that may be a mixture, right? They're Semites. Okay, these two here are like slightly tanned. These are darker, but if you look close, they may not necessarily be Africans or black Africans. There's some more here. This one here is quite dark. He's probably an Egyptian, maybe. And here is a photo of that particular area, and surprise, surprise, look at this. It looks like it's flat. We were looking at it because we used to be, because the scripture says, the globe's the earth's a sphere, it's a globe. Apparently Moses went up into the heavens or something and looked down, and there was a sphere of this globe, etc., etc. Galileo gets crap for saying it's a globe, apparently, when the Roman Catholic Church or whatever says no, it's flat. Christopher Columbus or somebody only ventured so far, and they didn't want to go to the edge. They thought they might fall off, all this sort of stuff, right? And you have today's modern groups that say, hey, it's not a globe, it's not a sphere, it's flat. So we're looking at this, and it looks like there's a slight curve, okay, but it's not flat. So we were looking closer, backwards, we could expand it, and we were like, hey man, that doesn't look like it's spherical or global, it looks like it's flat. Okay, this part here, if continued, would probably be like a flat disc. Okay, the surface would be like a flat disc. That's what we assume. So we're going to look into it a bit further, perhaps in another video. Okay, it says here Egypt seen from a spaceship. Okay, so someone took a photo. It's not saying it's from a UFO or anything like that. It's from a man-made, sent up into the atmosphere spaceship. Probably going to the moon or circling around the earth or whatever they're doing. Egypt seen from a spaceship. The photographer, and I didn't give his name, was looking south when he took the photograph. We clearly can see the Green Nile delta that has the shape of a triangle. From Nubia, modern Sudan, at the horizon to the left, somewhere around here, right? The river Nile winds itself from the Sahara Desert like a snake. And approaches the corner of the triangle. This is the location of Cairo and the Giza pyramids. Left of the triangle is the Suez Canal, visible as a long green string leading from the Mediterranean in front to a dark spot which is called the Bitter Lakes. Before the canal resumes its journey to the Gulf of Suez in the Red Sea. Right at the dark spot we can see another long string coming from the middle of the triangle. This is the Canal of the Pharaohs, built in around 1850 BC. The ancient Suez Canal is still green like the modern canal because it still contains water which feeds the plants above. It was once the end of a trade route from India, leading right into the Egyptian heartland. The Blue Nile is northern Ethiopia. The first Hebrews most likely used the waterway of the river Nile, the Blue Nile, which brought them from their community in Elephantine directly into this green and fertile land in northern Ethiopia. Aramaic documents have been found in Elephantine and Aswan, southern Egypt. Most of these documents are marriage contracts, private letters, religious and business documents from a Hebrew community that lived there from about 500 to 400 BC. Later, these people disappeared from Elephantine. They might have moved to northern moved to northern Ethiopia, and are now known as Beta Israel, House of Israel, or Community of Israel. And there is some old maps of Abraham's journey from Ur to Haran. The journey of Abraham might have a real background, and it matches a period of time in which people of the Middle East migrated in masses to escape from famine, civil war and other disasters. Events are unfolding. You don't know what that word is. I know. Looks like can't really see that word. Get a thing here, have a look at that. Just see the other way. You had to see that word. I'm going to expand it. Can't see that damn word. Okay. Put it over a little bit. Events are unfolding somewhere around 2000 BC or shortly after. Long-standing civilizations in Egypt, Mesopotamia and in the Indus Valley of ancient India suddenly collapsed due to the massive volcanic eruption of Vesuvius in around 1995 BC. A global-wide dust veil shot into the stratosphere by the explosion has caused 2, 3 or more dark summers with no harvest. Extreme weather conditions triggered drought and floodings. Starving people have fled to the regions in which they thought they could find food. Elamites, people in western Iran, whose language shows relationship with the Indus Valley civilization of Harappa, conquer Sumer and Abraham's hometown, Ur. Semitic speaking Canaanites, the so-called Amuru or Amorites, are invading the area around Babylon, where they build the new Semitic dynasty of the later king Hammurabi. He's got here the Amorites. This group, whose name means Westerners, came to inhabit the upper reaches of Mesopotamia in the second half of the 3rd millennium BC. Their original lands are hypothesized to have been in western Syria, and the Elamites invaded lower Mesopotamia, establishing their control of the region, including the city of Ur of Chaldea. Terah, Abraham's father, decided to migrate to the land of Canaan. He took his daughter-in-law Sarah and his grandson Lot along with him. Genesis 11:31. The stories of the Bible, or other scriptures for that matter, are often rejected as pure fantasy. The stories of Abraham contain some amount of historicity. Nevertheless, when Abraham left his Sumerian hometown for Haran on the first part of his journey. He had good reasons for it. Haran, Akkadian Haranu, meaning crossroad, also known as Karhai, was an important strategic centre in a major ancient city in Upper Mesopotamia, whose site is in the modern village of Haran, Turkey, 44 kilometres / 18 miles southeast of San. Can't really read that. Looks like Sanliurfa. It might be Sanhurfa. The settlement that would become Haran began as a typical Halaf culture village established around about 6,200 BC. The archaeological remains in ancient Haran show clearly why Abraham came here. It was one of the largest commercial, cultural and religious centres of the region. The Greeks called the city Helenopolis, meaning Greek city, in the early Christian period. The grey line along the river Tigris represents an alternate route of Abraham. It's probably this one here. This one here, maybe. Grey line, maybe. The old grey. You can see the borders. The grey line along the river Tigris. Where are we? Tigris. Yes, they probably went this way. Up here. The Exodus or expulsion from Egypt stuck in the collective memory of the Hebrews for hundreds of years. Ezekiel, around 622 to 570 BC, writes (13, 17) in Exodus, in Ezekiel, "Thus saith the Lord God, I will destroy the idols, and I will cause their images to cease out of Noth, and there shall be no more a prince of the land of Egypt. And I will put a fear in the land of Egypt, and I will make Pathros, Upper Egypt, Thebes, desolate, and will set fire in Zoan, Tanis, and will execute judgments in No, or Nor, Nu, or Ru, and Anu, or No in short." Meaning Heliopolis. "And I will pour my fury upon Sin, the desert of Sin, or Sin, between Elim and Mount Sinai, the strength of Egypt, and I will cut off the multitude of No, Memphis, capital of Lower Egypt, Egyptian, in Ebuhedj, the white walls, after the reconquest from the Canaanites. Minneta, enduring and beautiful. The young men of Aven, Varas, the former Hebrew capital in Egypt, an Egyptian, who ate Waret, and of Pibeseth, Bubastis, shall fall by the sword, and these cities shall go into captivity." After Habiru, ancient Hebrews, were no Canaanites, as they claimed, they would have had no need for such a grudge against exactly those places the Canaanite once had been expelled from, would they? Okay, here's some information here. Abraham's journey does not appear to be planned, as the Bible text suggests. That is literature. But it rather looks like a fight from famine or war. At first, he and his clan have departed for Haran in southern Anatolia, modern Turkey. After staying there for a while, the decision has been made to head to Canaan, but he has not stayed there for long. Instead, he has marched towards Egypt. There is a high likelihood that Abraham and his clan belong to the same people whom the Egyptians first called Hyksos, Egyptian Katsut, named Hyksos, says what the Canaanites were creating, a kingdom. These events described in the Hebrew Bible match almost perfectly with archaeological findings. After the defeat of their successors by the kings of Kamos and Amos and the fall of the capital Avaris, they all have been taken as prisoners of war and not as slaves, as the text suggests, and driven out again in an event known as the Exodus of Moses. In the era of Egypt's 13th dynasty, 1803 BC, 1549 BC. Probably even in the 12th dynasty, 1991 to 1802 BC. The Hyksos have arrived. Today they are identified with Canaanites, the ancestors of the Hebrews, and therefore also of Abraham. They have settled peacefully in Goshen in Lower Egypt, in which Imhotep I has built their capital Avaris. Soon they have established their own kingdom. That is the reason why the 14th dynasty, around 725 to 1650 BC, and the 15th dynasty 1650 to 1550 BC, have been Canaanite dynasties existing alongside the 13th Egyptian dynasty, 803 BC to 1649 BC. 16th dynasty, 1649 to 1582 BC. 17th dynasty, around 1580 to 1550 BC. And the 18th dynasty, 1550 to 1290 BC. When the Hyksos, or Canaanites, have tried to conquer Upper Egypt, that's Lower Egypt, they have aroused the Egyptians to fight for decades. Result: total defeat of the Hyksos, Canaanites, and their expulsion from Egypt. They got the boot. They got their butt handed to them on a plate. Out you go.